Ladies and gentlemen, from Gainsight's marketing team, please welcome Lauren Ulrich.
Hello, everyone. So we have one more session before lunch, and I'm here to introduce it. So when you think about companies and brands that you grew up with, GE is one of the first that comes to mind. But apparently, GE today is a completely different company, innovating and committed to providing success to their customers across multiple different industries. Does that sound a little complicated? Well, here's a quick video that explains more.
My mom, she makes underwater fans that are powered by the moon. My mom makes airplane engines that can talk. My mom makes hospitals you can hold in your hand. My mom can print amazing things right from her computer. My mom makes trains that are friends with trees. My mom works at GE.
Here with us today to share his vision and how customer success is powering it is Niloy Sanyal, Chief Marketing Officer at GE Power Digital Solutions. Niloy will also be answering some of your Slido questions, so get your thumbs ready. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Niloy.
Good morning, everybody. How's everyone doing? So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what does customer success mean in this era of digital industrial. And if you've never heard the term digital industrial, don't worry. We've got next 10 minutes to walk you through that. But before I do that, I want to share one of Nick Mehta type stories. One of my favorite moments this year was a couple of months ago. My 3-year-old daughter, Ria, came up to me suddenly and said, "Dada, I want to be a choo-choo train driver." And think about it, like almost all of us as we've been growing up dreamed of being a choo-choo driver or a pilot, but somehow over the years of getting educated, that sort of dream passes away. And I love that Nick and Allison earlier today talked about what does customer success mean in the real world. Well, there is a real world of industrial that we are going to have to transform to make this exciting for RIAs of the world. A little bit about what I have done, 14 years of my experience, mostly in the industrial space. I've lived in 5 continents, worked in 9 different countries, all in the industrial space. I've been in transportation, in energy, in healthcare, in aviation, all the spaces that GE has been in the past 125 years. Yeah, we just turned 125 last month. So, but I would say what's interesting about this is if you even take a little bit of a diversion and think about what's already happened in the consumer internet world, and you're familiar with all of these logos, some of you might be working at these companies. These companies have transformed many industries, and they've done it by focusing on customer experience. Whether it's redefining what transportation means, or talking about how media and entertainment would be redefined, and this focus on, or maniacal focus on customer experience is redefining other parts of the world. But we sometimes forget that there is a whole economy out there called the industrial economy. In fact, just from a US perspective, 75% of the economy is the industrial economy. And this is economy that runs on large machines. These are locomotives, airplanes, jet engines, power turbines, refineries, things that you don't necessarily see every day, and often we take it for granted, especially if you're living in a developed economy. You don't take it for granted if you're living in an emerging market or underdeveloped economy. However, there is a fundamental problem with this industrial world. And you can see what that problem is. If you look at just in the last decade, in terms of market capitalization, the top 10 companies, what used to be about 6 out of 10 industrial companies, are now just about 2. I'm still really glad to see GE in the top 10. But why is this trend happening? You could argue one of the reasons this trend is happening is because oil companies have going through a pretty dramatic shift, but I think that's not hitting the mark. One other reason is if you look at the industrial productivity, what used to be about 4% is now come down to about just 1%. And this is not just impacting the companies in the industrial world, but economies, given that 75% of the economy depends on these companies. But I would say the main reason why industrials are not doing so well is because historically industrials have not taken customer experience and customer success seriously. And why is that so? A big part of the reason is how the industrial economies work. They're usually monopolies or oligopolies. Most of you live in a place where you don't have a choice on which utility you want to go with for your electricity services. Or you may not know this, but 70% of the aviation market in US is just 5 airlines. Even though there are 5,000 airlines, it's a very small, large airlines that capture majority of the market. Same story goes on whether it's an oil and gas space or healthcare. In most of your zip codes, you probably only have access to 1 or 2 hospitals where you can go to for your services. So great that the industrial companies have a moat around them, but this moat is slipping away. And the fundamental reason this moat is slipping away is because of the first topic that I mentioned, that the consumer internet companies are redefining customer experience. And they're redefining customer experience because customers like us don't want to just own product. We want to own an experience. We don't want to just own product. We want to access the value of the product. And we want it to be hyper-personalized. We want to have the ludicrous mode in our car. We want to have each of our phones to have an experience that's only relevant to us and not something that's given by the company that we have contracted. That's not an experience you get from the industrial economy, and that has to change. Otherwise, the industrial economy and the companies here are going to get Uberized or Airbnb'd. But that said, there is another missing link. It's kind of going back to Nick's slide of the lonely customer success manager in a long road. Well, the customer success manager historically in the industrial economy are the service engineers. There are about 20 million of these worldwide. And this is kind of what you would have thought my daughter, if you had the vision of joining the industrial world, the customer success manager would look like a service engineer. But these guys are looking for help. They work with antiquated tools. They're not able to really make the right impact for their customers because they don't have the right information at the right time. In fact, just to give you a little bit of my perspective as a consumer, last week I had to go fix my German company sedan that I drive because one of the locks in my door wasn't working. And I went to that place and just waiting for an hour to be told that they didn't have the right part. Why couldn't they have let me upload the data in my car and an analytics engine would have told them that, hey, there's a likelihood that I need this part, and then scheduled my visit so that the part was available and the service engineer didn't have to give an excuse. By the way, that sounds like a really good startup idea. I know we have some VCs here. And if you do fend that, make sure you know where it came from. I don't know if that's how it works. But look, it might be easy for you to do that with cars. It's a little bit harder to do that with huge machines like airplanes and jet engines and power plants. But that's why there's so much value to be captured as well. And one of the main reasons the industrial world, and we're calling it the 4th industrial revolution, is going to go dramatically in a different mode is because of technology. Not that any of these single technologies that you see here by themselves are going to be disruptive. But what's special about the 4th industrial revolution is the ability for all of these technologies to work in tandem. I call it the combo effect. No time ever before has Moore's law been applied to the industrial economy at the same space and the same pace that you've seen in the consumer internet space. And not just that, this is already happening. And I would argue that we're just at the tipping point, almost like the first innings of a 9-inning game, where the Internet of Things for big machines, whether it's gas turbines, jet engines, or even light bulbs, that is going to drive this industrial revolution. One of the analysts has postulated that the industrial volume of data is going to be 49 times the consumer internet data in just a couple of years from now. So this is happening now. And this is already showing up in the market capitalization of the companies that are in the industrial internet space. So all that sounds great, but you would ask me, what does that have to do with customer success? I would say it's got everything to do with customer success. And in fact, in GE, we're making a bet that this is the fundamental shift that we're going to have as a company. Our CEO, Jeff Immelt, calls it that this is our plan A. We don't have a plan B. That a 125-year-old, these articles were last year, company is now going to be fundamentally a digital industrial company with customer success as the focus. And what you see in the picture here is the building that's only about 40 minutes away in our G Digital headquarters in San Ramon, where we have, over the last 5 years, hired about 2,000 developers, engineers, and data scientists, and they're working hand in hand with about 500 customer success managers globally to develop and execute and really wow our customers with digital solutions. But to be a digital industrial company, you need to have a completely different paradigm. Many of the industrial companies are very asset-centric, but you cannot think about digital industrial as your asset. You have to think about the complete totality of the assets that your customer deals with. So as a GE, we have a huge install base of assets, but traditionally we have thought about our jet engines, our turbines, and we're now talking about the full plant, the full fleet of equipments that are customers. But it's not just about the assets, it's about the workers. And not our workers, but our customers' workers. How can we help them be more effective to be able to deliver to the end customer? And one of the data points, just to make it real for you, we just acquired a SaaS company end of last year called ServiceMax. Some of you might have heard of it. It was one of the unicorns in the field service management space. And if you, as an investor, were looking for a data point, whether this is real or not, that was a company that got funded in 2008 with a $1 million funding. So from 2008 to 2016, to be $1 billion valuation, that's pretty impressive in the enterprise space. But it's not just about the assets and the workers, it's about not your priorities, but your customers' priorities. And I think this is the fundamental place where there still needs to be a phenomenal amount of work. What this room has been able to do in the last 5 years is nothing short of miracle. But I would say you're just scratching the surface in what your opportunity is in terms of the total addressable market. And this digital industrial space is where this next wave is going to be. To be successful in this space, you also need a different technology and a different platform. You need a platform that connects the things we talked about, connects the workers to your customers through digital solutions. And not just that, you have to connect your ecosystem. And this ecosystem is supply chain, it's your IT systems, and all of the vendors that you might have supporting you in the service of your customer. And this is one of the reasons that GE invested in our own Predix platform that we, very similar to how Amazon Web Services was developed, initially we developed it for our own purposes, to drive productivity inside of GE, given our large service base. In end of 2015, we opened it up to the world. So now, just in quick couple of years, we have 22,000 developers developing applications on their own. Many of them are customers in this Predix platform. And one of the things that is differentiating about this platform is the digital twin. The concept that you can now create a virtual copy of any machine or any facility in a seamless manner, and you can go back in history and see what happened to it, and you can look forward in future and predict what might happen to it. And that was a piece that I would say was a missing link in the past. But to make it a little bit real, why don't we talk about a few examples? So let's start with the airline industry. Not something that you would consider best in class in terms of customer experience, especially if you've been following the Twitters these days. However, to be fair to these companies, this is an incredibly hard industry to work with. Richard Branson, the CEO of Virgin Airlines, famously quipped, if you want to be a millionaire, you take $1 billion and start an airline company. So it's a little challenging industry, but that said, Again, the Internet of Things is dramatically going to shift how this industry works. Imagine if I can have data coming out of this airplane, not just the jet engine, but the full airframe, and it can seamlessly, when it lands, because you don't want to send that terabytes of data to the cloud when you're literally flying in the cloud. When it lands, if you connect to the cloud and run the analytics that's in the digital world, you can dramatically reduce the cost, on-time arrival, and recovery, which is usually driven by weather events. Just to give you a more specific example, the worker in this case, for instance, is the pilot. The impact of making the pilot fly the plane more efficiently is easily 2 to 5% reduction in the fuel consumption of that flight. And you multiply by the number of planes that an airline flies, that's billions of dollars of savings. So this is what customer success, I'll give you a little bit of a secret. To be successful as a customer success organization in a digital industrial world, you have to make sure you're measuring and delivering the impact that the customer cares about. And Nick mentioned this earlier today. They do not care about churn. They do not care about upsell. They care about lowering their cost, arriving on time, and improving the recovery. So as a customer success organization, you have to measure that and deliver those values. Take another example, the energy industry, utilities. This is getting transformed with digital technologies again. Many of you are in California. California has taken a renewable standard of achieving 50% renewable by 2030. That's a fairly dramatic goal. And we're starting to become pretty lonely in the US as a state to have those goals. But again, this is not easy to execute. Those types of goals are extremely difficult because if you're going to depend on the wind farms and the solar farms to develop your electricity, and by the way, as a consumer internet company, your data centers require you to have 100% reliable electricity and affordable electricity and hopefully clean energy. To be able to do that, you need these power plants to operate like virtual batteries. And that's the only way you can reduce your cost, you can improve your cleanliness of the renewable energy that you can supply in more abundance, and then you want to make it ubiquitous, especially if you're in countries like India, Pakistan, or Africa. As a continent, you need these technologies to skip a generation rather than having them go through the last 20 years of, and then the favorite example I have is hospitals. This is an industry, especially if you've been following the political dimension in the last few weeks or months now, that requires a complete rethink. In many economies, healthcare is taking a big chunk of your GDP, and that's impacting everything, not just your health, but your ability to grow as company and as professionals. But again, digital twin technologies and the right technology stack is going to transform the customer success in this world. So it's really important to look at these examples with a little bit of a different twist, because a lot of you here, and maybe if you could just give me a show of hands, how many of you work in companies that either sell to industrial or are themselves industrial companies? So about 5%, and I would postulate that in a couple of years' time, this is going to be a 10,000 event with half the crowd to be industrial companies, because that's what we're talking about. We are just at the tipping point where the industrial economy is going to completely redesign itself, and we need your help, customer success managers and experts, whether you are supplying software as part of the customer success management ecosystem, or you are a company that requires you to have customer success embedded in it. You need to be able to bring that skill set to the industrial economy, but that alone will not work. What you need is the digital industrial platform. Because again, the thing that did not happen in the past was the ability to connect the things, connect the workers with this notion of dedicated customer success management. And that's the only way we're going to have an amazing customer experience. So with that, I'm going to have Omer from Gainsight join me up on stage, and I'd love to answer a couple of questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I feel like you really feel at home here on stage. We were missing a Ross before, so if you want to apply to the job, we can definitely do that.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a life's ambition coming true. I always thought if I didn't have a job, I'll go back into acting.
There we go. Well, speaker success, that's how we do it. So first of all, if you have your thumbs ready, we're going to bring your questions on Slido. So feel free to ask questions here on stage, and Niloy is going to answer them. But I want to start with my own question. We talked a lot about customer success and your vision. How do you actually structure your own customer success organization? What are the metrics that you're looking for? It's all about KPIs, we said. What are your KPIs for the team?
Yeah, that's a great point. Look, for a company that's 125-year-old in the industrial economy, some would say we invented the industrial economy with our founding father, Edison, coming up with the light bulb. But a lot about customer success in the digital industrial world is going to be about culture change. And the way we have actually designed our customer success organization, and we have a few colleagues on our CS organization here in the audience, is they are a dedicated function in our San Ramon headquarter office and globally. That's about 500 customer success managers, but they also work very closely with the professional services, the consulting services, knowledge services, and support. So we pulled it together all under one organization focused on this digital industrial world.
Right.
But that said, I think what's interesting is the early trends that I'm noticing. Our digital business within GE is still pretty early stage. I kind of call myself part of a startup company that's 5 years old. There is a huge part of GE that is the industrial world. And we are completely transforming that in the way the customer success organization is set up and how it's measured. And like I was saying, one of the key differentiation we see that makes the CSO organization successful is this almost maniacal focus on the outcome that the customer cares about. That doesn't mean you don't take all of the CS best practices that this room is experts in,
right,
whether it's churn management or NPS management or how do you run an EBR. But those are the excess, very important. You got to measure those, but you also have to make sure you're measuring the whys.
And I think that really brings us to the question that got the most votes. How do you balance these two? On the one hand, if you're talking about transformation, the CSMs need to understand what are the trends in the industry, really learn about thought leadership, but also at the end of the day, there's the firefighting, there's the day-to-day, the tactical work. How do you make sure the team actually balances it right?
I don't think I would say we have the silver bullet and we know the answer to that. Part of the customer success organization's challenge is how do you get out of the firefight mode to be able to do something strategic for at least 10 to 20% of the time. And frankly, it's not just true for the CS organization. Many other functions have the same problem. But I'll say one differentiation that I've noticed and which is starting to pay a lot of dividends in our company, the ability for the customer success leadership to really be a glue for the company. If you think about customer success only in the context of your function and what you have to deliver, then it will fail. You have to be the bellwether of what the customer wants. And that's a huge responsibility.
Yep.
And part of that success criteria requires you to have the ability to motivate and frankly even inspire the leadership of other functions. So part of that goes back to talent. Where do you get the right talent that you can, in a digital industrial world, bring the two worlds together? I see our CEO, for instance, in our energy space, Steve Bowles, he spends a significant amount of time these days in the East Bay talking to our customer success organization to learn about what does that mean. And I would tell you that that is going to be one of the key differentiation in the short term, that the learnings we see from SaaS companies that we are adopting is going to start becoming part of what I would call the outcome as a service world, where hardware, services, software will all mesh together into an offer that the customer cares about.
You alluded to talent, so maybe I want to finish up with that one question. We all want our kids to be like in the video and be very excited about what we do. When you think about recruiting customer success managers, are you looking for the same skill set that we see in tech? How do you think about recruiting? And is anybody here in the room a candidate for what you are looking for at GE?
Absolutely. Look, we've hired a...
He pays me for this question, by the way.
No, but I would say we are humble in the context of GE that we want to learn from you. So if we don't find the experts who are in the industry, and I wouldn't say this is just GE, our customers in the industrial space are very eager to learn from what you can deliver. And I would say, again, the missing piece, if you just went to a utility company or an oil and gas company and say, hey, you should really pay attention to customer success, you will end up being an art project that Nick mentioned earlier. The differentiation is to have the metering, the ability to measure customer success through the lens of the customer, which is only possible if you have the right data, the right access to information from the assets, from the workers, that then you connect the dot to the customer success. So if you don't have those three elements, having the right architecture to drive internet, industrial internet, linked to customer success best practices, my last slide, that equation, you will not be able to succeed.
Fantastic. Well, that's a lot of food for thought just before lunch. Thank you for the questions. And please help me thank Niloy Sanyal from GE.
Thank you.
Thank you.